Hi everyone, welcome back to Fat Cat Maths. This week we are going to be looking at how to complete the square. For any question on the topic of completing the square, you'll likely be asked one of two questions. Firstly, you might be asked to solve a quadratic equation, where you're given something like this. Secondly, you might be asked to find the coordinates of the turning point. We'll go over what that means in a second. Remember that for any quadratic equation, if we put this onto a graph, we would either get a curve or a circle. When we're being asked to solve a quadratic equation, either through completing the square or another method, we are essentially being asked to find the 2 points at which that curve goes through the x-axis. Even though there will be an x and a y coordinate for any point on a graph, we don't really care about the y-coordinate for these 2 points, because it will always be 0 if we're going across the x-axis. That's why when we solve a quadratic equation, we will always come up with 2 options for x, but we don't really talk about y. When it comes to finding the coordinates of the turning point, we're only looking for 1 point, and that point could be anywhere. So we need an x-coordinate and a y-coordinate. When the examiners ask you to solve a quadratic equation by completing the square, they're looking for something really specific. This video is going to be going over what the steps are and how you can get those marks, but I'm not going to go into too much detail about why we're doing each step. So if you're interested, have a look at the resources I've listed below. The first thing we need to do is start with an x inside a single set of brackets. The next thing you have to do is half whatever your middle term is. We've got a +4 there, so I'm going to half that and make it a +2. You put that in the brackets and square that set of brackets. The next step is to square the number that you just wrote down. We wrote 2, so I'm going to square that and make it 4. And then you take that number away. Next, you add in whatever is left from your original equation. We've still got a +1 equals 0, so I'm going to add that in too. Next, we need to simplify those numbers, so a -4 and a +1 simplified is -3. Once I write that out, I need to look at whatever is outside that set of brackets and move it to the other side of the equal sign by changing the sign. That -3 is going to move over and I'm going to change the sign to a positive. This is when we start to really solve the equation. We need to square root each side, so the square root of a set of brackets squared would just be whatever is inside that set of brackets, so I'm going to put x + 2. And for now, we can write the square root of 3 as √3. What's really important to note here is that we need to make it a plus or a minus √3. If we take 16 for example, a 4 times a 4 would make 16. But a -4 times a -4 would also make 16, because a negative times a negative makes a positive. That means that when we're square rooting that 3, we don't know whether it's a negative or a positive, so we're going to have 2 options. Next, we want to move the 2 over so that the x is on its own, and to do that we change its sign. So now x either equals a -2 add the square root of 3, or x equals a -2 take away the square root of 3. If you're on a non-calculator paper, you can leave your answer like this, but if you're in a calculator paper and they don't say otherwise, it's best to work this out fully. Let's try with another equation, but I want you to try and pause the video and use the rules to work this out for yourself. So first we would start with an x inside a single set of brackets. Then we would half the middle term to make it -4 and put that inside the brackets and square them. Next we would square that number that we've just written down, so 4 squared is 16 and we would take that away. And then we would add whatever is left, so +15 equals 0. and then I move the -1 to the other side of the equals sign to make it a positive. Next, I need to square root both sides, so x minus 4, and the square root of 1 will be a plus or a minus 1, because 1 times 1 is 1, and -1 times -1 is 1 as well. My last step is to solve, so I'm going to move that -4 to the other side of the equal sign, making it a positive. So x either equals 4 add 1, which would mean that x equals 5, or x equals 4 take away 1, and that means that x will equal 3. Pause the video here and try and do this example without the rules in front of you. So the first step would be to put an x into a set of brackets. Half of -10 is -5, so I'm going to put that in the brackets and square them. Next, we need to square the term that we just wrote down, so a -5 squared is 25, and we need to take that away. Then we add whatever is left, so we've got a +7 equals 0. Then when I simplify that, a -25 add a 7 is a -18. And then I'm going to move the -18 over to the other side, and that will make it a positive. Next, we need to square root each side. So on the left-hand side, I've got an x minus 5, and on the right-hand side, I've got a plus or a minus the root of 18. We want the x to be on its own, so I'm going to move the 5 over to make it a positive. And now either x equals a 5 plus the square root of 18, or x equals a 5 minus the square root of 18. Brilliant, well done. So we've covered solving a quadratic equation using completing the square. Next, we're just going to go over how you find the coordinates of the turning point. So to complete the square, as normal, I would put an x inside a single set of brackets and half that middle term. So I'm going to add that into the brackets and square them. Next, we want to square the number that we just wrote down, so the square of 7 is 49, and we need to take that away. Then we just add or take away whatever is left, so I've got a -9 that I'm going to add in at the end. Just as before, we would simplify now, so a -49 minus 9 is -58. And this is the point at which we stop, because we can actually get the coordinates from what we've got here. Whatever is in the brackets with the x, if you change the sign, that is your x coordinate. So in this case, our x coordinate would be -7. Whatever is at the end is our y coordinate, so -58 will be our y. These two numbers give us the coordinates of the turning point of our graph, so you can see that it's exactly the same as before, but half the work, so it's a lot easier. Great, well done. Let's go over a summary. Remember, if you see the bullseye, pause the video here to take notes. For questions in which you need to complete the square, you will likely be asked one of the following two questions. Either you'll be asked to solve a quadratic equation. These are the points on the curve that go through the x-axis. The y will always be 0, so we don't need to write this down, but we'll have two options for our x. The second type of question is to find the coordinates of the turning point, and for that you will need a value for x and a value for y. Okay, that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for taking the time. I hope this helped. Please hit that subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you next week.